1. The prestigious Smith family of New York. Emily Smith grew up in the kind of world most people only see in glossy magazines or Hollywood films. The Smiths lived on the tree-lined outskirts of New York City, their mansion nestled behind wrought iron gates and manicured hedges, standing as a silent witness to decades of old money luxury and success. The house itself, a sprawling colonial-style estate, boasted marble floors, high ceilings, dazzling chandeliers, and a grand staircase that curved elegantly upwards, a setting worthy of the city's most extravagant galas and family holidays. Her father, Robert Smith, was a pillar of New York's upper-class society. As the founder and CEO of an elite financial firm on Wall Street, he was respected by his peers and admired by the media. He was a man who exuded power and composure, his days marked by sharp suits, important meetings, and meticulously scheduled dinners with influential clients. It was well known that Robert's word carried weight, both in the boardroom and in the exclusive country clubs his family frequented. Emily's mother, Margaret, had been the heart of the home, a gracious hostess, philanthropist, and loving parent. Her radiant warmth made the mansion a true home, balancing the outward perfection with real affection and kindness. Tragically, Margaret passed away when Emily was just 10 years old, leaving behind not just heartbreak, but also an emptiness in the family that the ornate furnishings could never fill. For several years, the house felt somber. Emily, an only child, grew up surrounded by privilege, but also by the heaviness of loss. She clung to her studies and extracurricular activities, determined to make her father proud, while quietly cultivating the empathy and resilience her mother had taught her. Robert, meanwhile, threw himself into work as a way of coping, but eventually, loneliness crept in. It wasn't long before he crossed paths with Lisa, a strikingly beautiful woman with sharp business instincts and a polished background. Lisa, recently arrived in New York following a high-profile divorce, had 2 children of her own, Ashley, who was about Emily's age, and the younger, Dylan. After a year-long courtship, Robert and Lisa's engagement became a hot topic in society columns, culminating in a lavish wedding that brought new energy and new personalities to the Smith estate. The blended family presented an image of perfect, modern harmony, often photographed at charity events or vacationing on the Hamptons beaches. Yet, within the walls of their mansion, where the air was often scented with fresh roses and expensive perfume, subtle tensions began to simmer, a dynamic that outsiders could never guess. While Emily was accustomed to the expectations and culture of New York's elite, she now had to navigate the complexities of step-siblings and a new maternal figure who brought her own rules, ambitions, and carefully hidden motives into the household. On the surface, the Smiths remained the picture of success and prosperity. Yet, for Emily, life at the top of New York's social ladder was about to become far more complicated than anyone could imagine. A lonely childhood. Despite the opulent surroundings and promise of a seemingly perfect life, Emily's childhood after her mother's passing was marked by a growing sense of isolation. When Lisa and her children moved into the Smith mansion, everything Emily considered familiar began to shift in subtle, unsettling ways. The laughter that once echoed in the grand hallways was replaced by an undercurrent of tension, and the little corners of the house that used to bring comfort now felt distant and unwelcoming. At first, Emily tried her best to adapt. She extended kindness to her new stepmother, calling her Mrs. Lisa, and following every new household rule with polite diligence. She attempted to befriend Ashley, her new stepsister, by inviting her to study sessions or offering to share her favorite books, but the warmth was never reciprocated. Ashley, competitive and outspoken, seemed to relish her new social standing in the wealthy household.
Let's see what you
She
got.
routinely excluded Emily from conversations, mocked her interests, and formed a tight alliance with her brother Dylan, leaving Emily to eat alone or spend evenings in her room with only her violin for company. Lisa's subtle favoritism became more apparent as the days passed. While she lavished attention and praise on her own children, Emily's successes at school or her achievements in music went largely ignored or, worse, dismissed as insignificant. Anytime Emily asked for something, a new set of paints, a field trip, even just her weekly allowance, Lisa would question her needs or insist she was being spoiled, even as Ashley and Dylan's requests were granted without hesitation. Birthday parties and family gatherings, once sources of happiness, became fraught with discomfort. Emily often noticed her name left off the list of planned activities or her suggestions undermined in front of guests. She became adept at hiding her feelings, forcing a smile for family photos, even as she longed for the affection and encouragement she had once known. At school, Emily's behavior remained exemplary. Her grades consistently among the best. Yet, even here, the subtle effects of her home life began to manifest. She was hesitant to invite classmates over, fearing they would sense the coldness that had crept into her home. Over time, she stopped sharing much about her family altogether, choosing instead to throw herself into academic clubs and arts programs where she could find reassurance and self-worth she no longer received at home. Inside the mansion's vast, echoing halls, Emily developed a strong sense of independence and quiet resilience. She took solace in late-night reading, long walks in the garden, and the occasional letter she wrote to her late mother, carefully hidden in a locked journal as confidences she could tell no one else. Though her days were lined with loneliness, these small rituals became her lifeline, shaping a quiet internal strength that one day would help her endure far greater storms, jealousy, and hidden schemes. As the months drifted into years after Lisa and her children entered the Smith family, the household's unspoken divisions deepened. Emily, once the cherished daughter, found herself increasingly on the margins, an outsider peering in on her own life, powerless to halt the slow erosion of her place in the family. Lisa's subtle campaign against Emily began quietly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was the little things. A dismissive look when Emily expressed an opinion at the dinner table, a gentle redirection of Robert's attention toward Ashley or Dylan, or a condescending remark masked beneath a sweet tone. "You're so intense, Emily. Maybe lighten up a bit." These microaggressions carried a cumulative sting. With her father preoccupied with work and eager to maintain harmony, Emily often felt as though she was drowning in a sea of polite hostility. Ashley, emboldened by her mother's unwavering support, seized every opportunity to assert herself as the star of the blended family. Whenever Emily took pride in an academic achievement or a performance, Ashley would roll her eyes and mutter under her breath, "Of course, she'd make it about herself." Ashley and Dylan both cultivated an easy camaraderie with Robert, going out of their way to participate in activities they knew he enjoyed. Watching basketball, playing chess, or planning weekend boating trips at the family's lakeside property. Emily, by contrast, was gently squeezed out of these occasions, sometimes through scheduling conflicts invented by Lisa. "Oh, Emily, you have your violin practice today, don't you?"
Please, I didn't mean
Or
to.
else by a simple failure to inform her about plans altogether. At school, Ashley worked to undermine Emily's confidence even further. She would passively point out how strange it was that Emily stayed late with teachers, or whisper to classmates about Emily's preference for reading over joining parties. Under the weight of such social sabotage, Emily's circle of friends began to shrink.
Rough night, huh?
She wondered at times if she was imagining the hostility, if it was her own fault for not trying harder, for not fitting in. But at home, the pattern was brutally clear. Lisa never scolded her own children for the sharp remarks they directed towards Emily, but she was quick to reprimand Emily for any minor slip or sign of independence. When Emily landed a spot as concertmaster in the school orchestra, Lisa coolly suggested that perhaps her time might be better spent helping Ashley with her science project. A prestigious award Emily earned for her writing was met with a shrug and a reminder that writing is just a hobby, darling. One day, you'll need to learn something practical. Even gifts were distributed with covert messages. When Christmas came, Emily received a sensible coat for when you walk to the library, while Ashley and Dylan unwrapped the latest gadgets and luxury accessories. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and shared meals, became a battleground of invisible lines. Emily was assigned to set the table, clear the plates, and do the dishes, tasks she accepted out of habit, though now they felt like punishments rather than responsibilities. Lisa would comment on the presentation of a salad or the evenness of place settings, always with that same, slightly saccharine tone. Perfectionism can be tiring for everyone, Emily, you know. The implication stung. Excellence was expected, but never appreciated. In family meetings or discussions about summer vacations, Emily's suggestions were routinely overruled. "I don't think that's realistic," Lisa would say, eyes flickering toward Robert, who, anxious to avoid conflict, would nod without protest. Ashley's plans, in contrast, met with enthusiasm. A trip to Miami Beach for her birthday. Absolutely. A spa weekend for Dylan, because boys need attention too. Of course, the more Emily tried to reach her father privately, the more elusive he became. He was always tired, distracted, or needed by Lisa for some pressing matter. If Emily voiced a concern, Lisa would often step in with a sympathetic smile. "You must understand, Rob, the stress of being a teenager. It's a lot. Maybe she should see someone about handling her emotions." Suddenly, Emily's natural reactions, hurt, frustration, longing, were reframed as problems to be managed, quirks to be corrected, rather than the justified products of her environment. Outside eyes would never have guessed the simmering tensions inside the stately home. The family's public face was polished to a mirror sheen. They appeared together at charity galas, posed for glossy Christmas cards sent to hundreds of contacts, and uploaded cheerful Instagram posts from the ski chalet in Aspen or sun-bleached summers in the Hamptons. Lisa cultivated powerful social connections and worked hard to ensure her children were included in New York's most exclusive circles. Yet, when the door closed each night, the real games began. Emily became the scapegoat for small domestic troubles: missing mail, unwashed towels, misfiled paperwork. Lisa, always in control, leveraged her position in subtle but damaging ways, quietly lobbying Robert to reduce Emily's allowance, or privately instructing the housekeepers to prioritize Ashley and Dylan's rooms. Occasionally, Lisa would stage moments of generosity, inviting Emily to join for lunch or shopping, only to remind her in front of the others that not everyone needs everything their heart desires. These gestures were never gifts, only tools of comparison and control. As the months passed, Emily's sense of isolation sharpened into something more complex, a wary vigilance. She learned to study Lisa's expressions, for any sign of coming trouble, to keep her phone and computer password protected, to stash important things in locked drawers. She withdrew further into her world of books and music, sensing that even her smallest vulnerabilities might be weaponized against her. Ashley, meanwhile, delighted in her new status. She threw parties in the Smith mansion. Small get-togethers, she insisted, despite the hired catering and valet parking. Emily was invited only as an afterthought, expected to play host to Ashley's friends, but never join them. Afterward, Lisa would chirp at breakfast. Ashley is such a natural, isn't she? You could learn a lot from your sister about fitting in. The word sister always had a false ring, a shallow gloss over the truth of their rivalry. Once, Dylan accused Emily of breaking his gaming console, a lie easily disproved, but one that stuck in everyone's mind. Lisa scolded Emily. It's important to respect each other's things. No apology came when the console was found undamaged in Ashley's room. The sense of injustice grew inside Emily, mingling with hurt and helpless rage. There were rare moments late at night when Robert would pause outside Emily's door, hand hovering as if to knock. More than once, Emily listened for the quiet tap that never came. Perhaps in those moments, he sensed that something was wrong or missed the daughter he'd once adored. But the world Lisa had constructed was airtight. Any doubts or questions were quickly soothed away, smoothed over by her practiced charms and whispered reassurances. It seemed to Emily that there were two families in the Smith home, divided by invisible glass. On one side stood Lisa, Ashley, and Dylan, confident, social, always collectively in the right. On the other, Emily, observant, cautious, and ever more sullen, whose loyalty to the memory of her mother was her only defiance. Yet beneath the armor of hurt, resentment, and careful self-control, something began to shift in Emily. She realized that Lisa's power depended on control and perception, on the willingness of others to accept the facade. The unfairness, instead of breaking her, began to forge something stronger, an acute awareness of hidden motives and whispered secrets. Emily promised herself that even if she had to stand alone, she would see clearly. While Lisa played her games out in the open, Emily started to watch, to listen, and to wait. Little did Lisa know, the daughter she dismissed as unassuming and compliant was, in fact, quietly preparing to reclaim her voice. And, eventually, to upend everything. Turning point, the financial secret. Emily had always respected boundaries. Every memory of her late mother reinforced the importance of privacy and trust. But one night, restlessness tugged at her. She could hear a distant hum of laughter from the guest wing, where Lisa entertained a visiting business associate late into the evening. Unable to sleep, Emily wandered the mansion's hallways, the silence broken only by the muffled sound of jazz drifting up from below. She paused outside Lisa's private study, an elegant, always locked room with frosted glass doors and modern art lining the walls. Normally, the door was impenetrable, but in her hurry that evening, Lisa must have forgotten, for the door sat slightly ajar. The light from the hallway cast long shadows into the room, illuminating Lisa's meticulously organized desk. Folders stacked with financial statements, a new laptop glowing in sleep mode, and a sturdy, leather-bound notebook sat open, its pages full of neat, looping cursive. Out of habit more than intent, Emily stepped inside, heart pounding, curiosity warring with the guilt of intrusion. She reminded herself that she was not here to snoop, just restless, perhaps hoping to find a forgotten comfort or a whiff of her old life. But as she stood by the desk, her eyes were drawn to a series of brightly colored Post-it notes stuck onto spreadsheets, their labels cryptic. Fund B, transfer set to, BOS account. Something felt off. The numbers were in the millions, staggering sums even for her family. Why would Lisa need such large transfers? A closer look revealed inconsistencies. Transfers between shell companies, repeated wire instructions to unfamiliar banks, and several entries with initials that didn't match anyone in the Smith family. Emily hesitated. Every rational voice in her head screamed for her to close the notebook, leave everything as it was, and forget what she'd seen. But somewhere deeper inside, the suspicion that had grown over the years, nurtured by Lisa's whispers and manipulations, began to shift into focus. Her hands trembling, Emily snapped a few photos with her phone. As she did, her mind began racing, replaying moments she'd observed over the past year, and realizing how many late-night phone calls, sudden business emergencies, and mysterious weekend trips Lisa had taken. Emily noticed a USB drive plugged into the laptop. With a mixture of dread and adrenaline, she clicked it open. Dozens of folders, cryptically labeled, burst into view. She copied what she could to her own flash drive, barely daring to breathe. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Startled, Emily snapped the laptop shut, pocketed her flash drive, and slipped out of sight into the shadows of the corridor. Her heart pounding so loudly, she was sure it would draw attention. Hidden behind a pillar, she watched Lisa enter the study, glance suspiciously around, then lock the door. That night, Emily slept with the drive tucked under her pillow and a new awareness burning in her chest. In the following days, Emily combed through what she'd gathered, piecing together a puzzle she had never meant to find. It became chillingly clear. Lisa was orchestrating a complex scheme to embezzle funds from Robert's company, using falsified invoices, layered bank accounts, and aliases. Lisa had laundered millions out of Smith Financial Holdings, money quietly funneled into secret accounts, some in the names of relatives Emily had never even heard of. There were scanned passports for overseas accounts, encrypted email trails with names and addresses that matched none of the Smith family members. Emily found a hidden folder on the USB titled Personal, containing a scanned signature page apparently forged in her father's name, and details of investments in her step-siblings' names, none of which Robert knew about. The document timestamps matched up with Lisa's mysterious business trips to Europe and the Caribbean, always under the guise of client meetings. Shock turned quickly to horror as Emily grasped the magnitude of Lisa's betrayal. This was not a minor act of greed. Lisa had risked the family's fortune, the company's reputation, and most devastatingly, Robert's freedom. His name was attached to many of the wire authorizations in signed documents. Emily realized with a sickening certainty that if the fraud was discovered by outsiders, her father might be held legally responsible, facing public disgrace and possibly jail time. Fearful but resolute, Emily knew she couldn't confide in anyone. Not the housekeepers, who answered to Lisa. Not Ashley or Dylan, whose loyalty to their mother was ironclad. And certainly not her father, who seemed more distant and distracted than ever. Alone, she used the mansion's library to research financial crimes, whistleblower protections, and forensic auditing. Each night, after the rest of the house had gone to sleep, she pored over the digital evidence, mapping every transaction and connection, building a file that could survive even if she was found out. To her surprise, the act of gathering evidence gave Emily strength. No longer was she a mere observer in her own life. She was a detective, a protector. She encrypted her findings, bought a small lockbox for her physical copies, and began drafting a timeline of events that would stand up to legal scrutiny. She even recorded snippets of conversation, Lisa's veiled threats on the phone, cryptic instructions to her business partners, whenever the opportunity arose, without suspicion. Emily understood the risk. If Lisa discovered her, the consequences would go far beyond family arguments. She would be discredited or cast out. Her relationship with her father, however threadbare, might be severed forever. Yet, the knowledge of the injustice unfolding and her father's unwitting role as a puppet in Lisa's scheme fueled her determination. After a week of clandestine research, Emily skipped a school club meeting to visit an attorney she found online. Using a false name, she asked hypotheticals about family embezzlement and whistleblowing. The answers terrified her. Yes, Robert could be prosecuted. Yes, her evidence could matter. But the lawyer cautioned, make sure you have irrefutable proof and be ready for backlash. Family fraud cases always turn ugly. The advice stiffened Emily's resolve. Step by step, she assembled her arsenal. Screenshots, voice recordings, timestamps, a forensic chart of the money flow, and a written narrative of her discovery. She also backed up all files to a cloud account only she could access. She practiced what she'd say to her father, rehearsing late at night until her fear gave way to icy focus. She would not fail him. Lisa continued her life, blissfully unaware. At least, Emily hoped. The stepmother's charm was on full display, expertly hosting garden parties and managing the family's public persona. But Emily saw past it now. Every smile, every gentle touch, every glass raised in a toast was suspect. The game had changed, and she was no longer playing defense. For the first time since childhood, Emily felt a sense of purpose, a conviction that her intelligence and courage could do more than win competitions or perfect essays. She could protect her father, save his company, and finally bring light to the lies that had poisoned her family. She knew the day was coming when secret conversations and whispered threats would be replaced by confrontation in the hard glare of truth. And as fall drew in, leaves swirling on the mansion's vast lawn, Emily kept her secret safe, waiting for the perfect moment to expose the woman who had turned her home into a stage for manipulation and betrayal. Gathering evidence, every day after her discovery, Emily lived with a heightened sense of paranoia and resolve. The mansion, with its ornate chandeliers and polished marble floors, became a maze of both beauty and danger. At every turn, she was reminded of how precarious her position had become. There were moments when she could feel Lisa's eyes lingering on her longer than usual, a sly smile suggesting questions unspoken. Still, Emily was determined to build an airtight case, knowing that one misstep could destroy any hope of justice. She became painstakingly methodical, making lists in her locked journal and planning out each move down to the minute. Her first goal was to leave no digital trace. She swapped her phone for a prepaid device, reasoning that Lisa, always digitally savvy, might have access to the family's Wi-Fi logs. With this burner phone, she began to email evidence to a private, encrypted address she set up under a pseudonym, ensuring that if anything happened to her or her computer, the information wouldn't vanish with it. Emily kept her activities tightly compartmentalized. Daytime was for schoolwork, for smiling when she was supposed to smile, and answering Lisa's pointed questions. How was orchestra practice, Emmy? Anything new with your friends? With practiced neutrality. After midnight, she would lie awake, waiting for the house to settle, then slip out of bed, unearth her secret project. Files hidden beneath a loose floorboard, flash drives stashed inside hollowed-out books, and voice memos encoded and saved under fake names in her cloud storage. The search for concrete proof pushed her into new, intimidating territory. She used the library's computer to access online databases for information about wire transfers, offshore banking, and the shell companies Lisa had left scattered across her notes. With each article and forum thread, Emily learned a new vocabulary: financial due diligence, forensic audit, whistleblower protection. She felt herself changing, slowly but permanently. A teenager forced to take on the instincts and skills of a private investigator. One particularly tense afternoon, Lisa announced a last-minute shopping trip for just the girls, Ashley, Dylan, and herself, leaving Emily alone at the mansion. The moment Emily watched their car disappear down the drive, her hands began to tremble, not with fear, but with cold determination. She hurried to Lisa's study, this time wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. She photographed every newly arrived statement and correspondence, focusing on handwritten notes in the margins that seemed to betray Lisa's true intentions. Reminders about Swiss appointments, the initials of supposed consultants, and cryptic phone numbers scrawled along the edge of a page. She noticed the disposal shredder had been emptied unusually often recently. Unwilling to leave anything to chance, Emily scoured the office trash for discarded printouts, careful to reconstruct anything that could have been torn. A half-shredded letter provided the missing link between two of the shell companies, confirming her worst suspicions. Layer by layer, the puzzle fit together. The evidence wasn't only on paper. Emily learned to watch and listen, carrying a digital recorder, camouflaged as a keychain, whenever she thought Lisa might be discussing business on the phone. Late one evening, concealed by the tall azaleas outside the study window, she recorded Lisa's half-whispered threats and promises to someone named Victor, her tone cold and calculating as she discussed deadlines and contingencies if Robert starts asking questions. Emily's nerves were always frayed. She flinched at loud noises and found herself jumping whenever she heard footsteps in the hallway. One close call came when Dylan barged into her room unannounced one afternoon, looking for his missing sneakers. Emily managed to shove her notebook beneath her pillow and greet him with a forced casualness, her heart hammering so hard she feared he could hear it. As her evidence mountain grew, she began cataloging everything in a spreadsheet: dates, amounts, account numbers, and direct quotes from phone calls. She used color coding to separate hard proof from circumstantial hints. If she was going to confront her father and possibly authorities, she couldn't risk any loophole. Emily knew her father was a stickler for documentation. If the files weren't organized and bulletproof, Robert's legal team, or Lisa's, could tear them apart in an instant. She practiced boiling complex chain of ownership charts into simple visual diagrams, imagining a courtroom jury, unfamiliar with finance, grasping the full shock of Lisa's duplicity. But Emily's careful plotting was never free from doubt. There were nights when exhaustion and dread nearly overwhelmed her. She lay awake thinking, what if Dad won't believe me? What if the evidence isn't enough? The idea that her father, so proud yet so distant in recent years, might choose his new wife over his only child nearly shattered her resolve. But at her lowest, she would retrieve the oldest letter she had ever written to her late mother, hidden in her violin case since she was just 11. Rereading those trembling words gave Emily the courage to continue. In parallel, she used her school resources to understand proper legal procedures. She contacted a youth helpline under another fake identity, describing her friend's discovery of corporate fraud in a family business. The counselor's advice was clear: keep yourself safe, Tell a trusted adult. Keep copies of everything somewhere nobody else can access. Emily followed every word. She created password-protected backups in multiple places, a USB drive taped under her desk, a cloud folder only accessible at the library. Even a micro SD card she hid in a box of old crayons. All the while, Lisa's behavior appeared unchanged. She hosted cocktail parties, gossiped about philanthropic causes, and praised Emily's independence with an insincere affection that always bordered on mocking. Ashley and Dylan remained blissfully oblivious, their world awash in new tennis lessons, designer sneakers, and expensive gadgets. Robert, stretched between travel and business, seemed not to notice the shifting tides within his own home. Eventually, Emily realized she couldn't do it alone forever. While researching whistleblower laws, she composed an anonymous tip to a respected local law firm specializing in white-collar crime, outlining a hypothetical situation remarkably similar to her own. The response was succinct. If your hypothetical friend can prove her relative's signature was forged, and if the funds crossed state or national borders, the case would become federal. Emily spent the final week before disclosure rehearsing her delivery. Sitting cross-legged on her bed, she memorized every figure, every date, until the details felt burned into her mind. She wrote out what she wanted to say to her dad, then rewrote it, editing for clarity and calm. She wanted her father to see that this came from love, not revenge. Her final act before sharing the truth was the most difficult. She printed a single, detailed dossier and placed it inside a sealed envelope, marked, "For Dad only." The envelope, together with a heartfelt letter, was locked in her violin case, her mother's favorite instrument, where only Robert would think to look if Emily herself was unwilling or unable to see the confrontation through to the end. For the first time in years, as Emily looked at the moonlit New York skyline from her window, the mansion didn't feel quite so imprisoning. Evidence in hand, courage hard-won, she was ready to step into the storm and tell her story, no matter the cost, unveiling the truth. The weight of the evidence was a constant presence in Emily's life, tucked away in encrypted files, hidden behind false email addresses, locked in secret drawers. But carrying the truth was a different kind of burden, pressing down on her chest with every encounter, every strained dinner, every unspoken question in her father's tired eyes. Emily knew the day had come to bring the secrets into the light, no matter what they might cost her. She chose a Saturday, rainy, gray, and still. Lisa had left early for a charity luncheon, taking Ashley and Dylan with her. For once, the house was empty except for Emily and her father. It was the first time in months they had been alone together, the kind of moment Emily used to live for as a child, when life was simple and her father's presence meant comfort and guidance. Now, anxiety coiled tight in her stomach, warring with determination. She found him in his study, reviewing reports and barely looking up when she stood in the doorway. "Dad," she said softly, her voice trembling despite her rehearsed resolve. "There's something I need to tell you. It's important, and I need you to listen." Robert Smith, accustomed to handling crises in billion-dollar deals, sensed a gravity in his daughter's tone that cut through his distraction. He studied her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks, noticing the shadows go under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. He nodded and set aside his papers. Emily handed him the sealed envelope, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the thunder rumbling outside. "Please read everything," she said. "Don't say anything until you're done." He opened the envelope. For several long minutes, Emily sat in silence as Robert scanned the printouts. Bank statements, forged signatures, lists of transactions. Her careful timeline annotated with explanations in her looping handwriting. There was a letter, too, at the top. Raw, honest, full of everything she had been unable to say aloud. The fear, the isolation, the hope that even in betrayal, truth could heal. When he finished, Robert's hands were shaking. He looked up at his daughter. Bewilderment and devastation etched across his face. "Emily, how did you find all this?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Lisa made mistakes. I only wanted to help. At first, I was just curious. But then, I saw things that didn't make sense. I started digging deeper. Dad, she's been stealing from you and from your company. She's been using fake names, fake companies. Your signature is on things you never signed. I have recordings, bank records. Everything is backed up and protected. I had to do it. For you. For us." Robert sat back, the full reality of Lisa's betrayal washing over him. For a man who prided himself on intuition and ironclad control, the feeling of being blindsided by someone he trusted was almost more than he could bear. Bewilderment quickly gave way to anger, not at Emily, but at himself, for ignoring small warnings, for being seduced by smooth reassurances, and for letting his only daughter suffer in silence. He was quiet a long time, his eyes closed, hands steepled. Emily waited, her muscles aching with tension. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice measured but edged with pain. "Emily, you did the right thing. I'm sorry you had to do this alone." He stood and embraced her. And for a second, Emily felt like a child again. But the work wasn't over yet. The next phase unfolded rapidly. Robert, moving now with the command of a man used to handling emergencies, called his most trusted attorney, someone outside Lisa's circle, a friend from law school who owed him no allegiance beyond the truth. They scheduled a meeting first thing Monday morning. Emily provided copies of her documents and digital evidence. The lawyer was astounded by the breadth and clarity of Emily's investigation. He double-checked the backups and immediately recommended bringing in a forensic accountant and a private investigator to ensure nothing was missed. Over the following days, the mansion was thick with tension and anticipation. Lisa noticed something was amiss. Her questions became sharper, her attention to Emily more pointed. But Emily, fortified by her father's belief in her, remained outwardly calm. She refused to give Lisa any indication of what was coming. The professionals worked quickly, verifying the evidence, confirming the forged documents, and tracking the flow of embezzled money through shell accounts scattered across continents. The findings were damning. Lisa's paper trail was extensive, and her involvement undeniable. Both Ashley and Dylan had accounts set up in their names, but the investigators found no clear indication they had known the source of their sudden inheritances. On Thursday, Robert confronted Lisa in the presence of both attorneys and accountants. The confrontation was steely and unflinching. Lisa tried all her weapons: denial, outrage, tears, manipulation, but each point was met by cold, irrefutable fact. As the magnitude of evidence mounted, her confidence cracked. Gone was the poised socialite. In her place was a desperate woman realizing her constructed world was crumbling. For Emily, it was both vindication and heartbreak. She witnessed the masks fall away, saw the genuine incredulity dissolve into fear and anger in Lisa's eyes. She watched her step-siblings shrink into the background, confused, hurt, betrayed in their own ways. Robert spoke only when necessary, his words precise and final. "You violated our trust. You put our family and my company at risk. The authorities have been notified. You will answer for what you've done. In the aftermath, the process moved swiftly. Charges were filed, assets frozen, trust funds audited. Lisa and her children moved out under discreet supervision. Robert insisted on as much dignity as possible for Ashley and Dylan, knowing they would be subject to enough scandal as it was. For Emily, the weeks that followed were surreal. She had dreamed for so long of being heard, of justice, of a return to the belonging she'd lost. Now that truth was out, peace did not come easily. The house was quieter. Her father spent long hours on the phone with lawyers and investigators.
Mary.
But he made space for her in his life again. Meals together, walks in the rain, evenings with music echoing through once cold halls. The story broke in local business news, then spread to larger media outlets. Robert Smith's stoic, honest response, admitting the family's internal failure and pledging full cooperation, earned reluctant admiration from both allies and rivals. Through it all, Emily remained by his side. No longer the invisible girl, she learned to stand tall, not in defiance, but with well-earned dignity and resilience. The ordeal left scars, but also gave birth to something new. In unveiling the truth, Emily had not only saved her family, she had found her own voice, irrevocably and unforgettably. Justice and growth, the wave of revelation that swept through the Smith household, left nothing untouched. In the days after Lisa's arrest, the mansion felt quieter, emptied of its previous pretense. The air itself seemed clearer, as though secrets had been swept out with the final resounding closure of the police car door. For Emily, though, the fight for justice was only beginning, and the path toward real healing would be longer and more complex than she ever imagined. The legal reckoning. The case against Lisa was strong, built piece by piece from the meticulous evidence Emily had assembled in secrecy. Prosecutors praised the thoroughness of the documentation, noting the precision with which the money trails and forged signatures were mapped. Yet even as the machinery of justice moved forward, Emily observed the proceedings with a bittersweet sense of vindication. Bringing the truth to light was necessary, but watching her former stepmother stand trial for her crimes was not a triumph, but a sobering lesson in how deeply ambition and greed could corrode the human spirit. Lisa's lawyers put up a fierce defense, painting her as a wronged woman and framing her actions as desperate responses to marital neglect. But the hard facts, the offshore accounts, the fake shell companies, the mountains of digital records were impossible to refute. In the end, the court found Lisa guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and forgery. The sentence was substantial, several years in federal prison, with restitution ordered for Robert's company and the family. The judge, stern but not unkind, acknowledged that the real wounds went beyond finances. The emotional damage to the family weighed heavily in the final judgment. Ashley and Dylan, though named in various accounts, were spared criminal charges. Investigations revealed they were beneficiaries, not co-conspirators, children swept up in the machinations of their mother. The system referred them to counseling and social services. For all three, Lisa's downfall marked the end of one life and the uncertain beginning of another, redefining home and family. With Lisa and her children gone, the Smith mansion no longer rang with forced laughter or superficial conversation. For weeks, the place was almost too large, echoing with memories of both joy and conflict. Emily and her father, Robert, confronted the silence together, facing the raw aftermath head-on. There were tearful late-night talks, times of mutual apology, and moments of awkwardness as they learned how to relate without the interference that had quietly shaped their relationship for years. Robert was at once grateful and heartbroken. With each headline about the case, he shouldered responsibility for not seeing the warning signs sooner. Yet, as the news frenzy died down and the city's attention turned elsewhere, he found solace in his daughter's courage. Their routines slowly merged into something resembling normalcy. Shared breakfasts, walks through the family garden, hours spent side by side in the library. Restoring trust that had almost been lost forever, Emily, meanwhile, began to shed the habits of secrecy that had once been her survival mechanism. She gave up the burner phone, deleted the encrypted folders, and allowed herself to feel the full weight and relief of the truth finally being known. Through therapy, she explored not just the trauma of betrayal, but also her lingering guilt over exposing Lisa and disrupting the lives of Ashley and Dylan. Sessions with a compassionate counselor helped her accept that responsibility for the harm did not rest on her shoulders, and that justice, though often painful, is also an act of love. The complex aftermath for the step-siblings. Over time, Emily reached out to Ashley and Dylan. The first contact was tentative. An email expressing hope they were getting support and reassurance that she never wanted to hurt them personally. Ashley didn't respond for weeks. Dylan replied simply that he missed the house, but not the pressure. Months later, an unexpected call from Ashley broke the lingering silence. Her voice was brittle but honest. She spoke of her anger, her confusion, but also a growing recognition that her mother's obsession with status had cost them more than just financial stability. The conversation ended with no promises of renewed closeness, but also no accusations. A small but meaningful step toward mutual understanding, rediscovering purpose. With the legal battle behind them, Emily threw herself into new challenges. She accepted an internship in her father's company, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity about the world of finance and ethics she had unwittingly learned to navigate. Rather than shy away from her experiences, Emily spoke about them publicly in carefully chosen settings, advocating for youth awareness around financial literacy and the dangers of blind trust in authority, even in one's own family. School became less a place of quiet escape and more a community where Emily's confidence flourished. Peers who had once whispered about her aloofness now looked to her as a source of reassurance, especially those struggling at home. Emily co-founded a support group for teens dealing with parental divorce, loss, and betrayal. Her authenticity, along with her willingness to listen without judgment, made her a lifeline for others facing their own storms. Her relationship with her father deepened as well. Robert encouraged Emily's independence, offered guidance rather than control, and, most importantly, respected her boundaries, trusting her to make her own choices while always being just a conversation away. Their bond was at last honest, forged by fire, and finally allowed to grow in the sunlight of truth. A new strength justice, Emily learned, was not a single dramatic moment in a courtroom, but an ongoing journey of accountability and healing. Closure was not about erasing scars, but about living with them, learning from pain without letting it become the defining feature of one's story. Over time, she found she could think about her mother and even the complicated chapter with Lisa, with gratitude for the strength they had instilled, whether by love or adversity. Life at the Smith estate settled into a new rhythm. Emily played the violin again, this time with friends instead of alone in her room. The sound of music, real and unforced, became a symbol of renewal. Even the grand staircase, a silent observer of so many secrets, now echoed with laughter, sometimes hesitant, but always genuine, looking toward tomorrow. In the end, justice for the Smith family was found not only in the sentences and the headlines, but in the quiet victories of trust regained,
Emily.
fears faced, and growth embraced. Emily's journey had forced her, far too early, into adult realities. Yet she emerged not hardened, but clarified, wise beyond her years, but still full of hope. The closing chapter of her story was not an ending, but a starting point,
It's been a while.
a promise that no manipulation,
Yes, it
no
has.
betrayal, could ever strip away her determination or worth. As she prepared for college and new adventures, Emily carried her experience not as a burden, but as proof that justice is possible and, more importantly, so is healing.